Hi and welcome to the Global Gathering. I'm Nathan Jones, and along with Steve Chalke, who you'll see later, I'm one of the two ministers of Oasis Church Waterloo. Whether it's your first time watching us or if you've been with us for the last couple of months, thanks for joining us this morning. Today we're starting a new series looking at some of the words of Jesus from the beginning of Matthew's account of Jesus' life. We're calling it The Great Reversal because it's based on the Beatitudes, which are 9 revolutionary countercultural statements which turned everything on its head. Statements which were a challenge to the religious leaders, which gave life to the people who heard them, and still have loads to teach us today. Steve's going to tell us more later. Then over the coming weeks, we'll hear from a few different voices from across the Oasis family who will be helping to unpack the messages behind these radical ideas and suggesting how the Beatitudes can help us, not just at the moment, but through all our lives. That's still to come later this morning, but now we're going to hear from Miriam Osmonalieva, who leads Oasis's work in Kyrgyzstan. We've been working in Kyrgyzstan for over a decade, supporting young people who have been raised in orphanages and are now leaving. We help them through the difficult process of leaving those safe spaces behind and transitioning into adulthood. Let's hear from Miriam on how coronavirus has impacted their work.
Hi, my name is Miriam Osmonalieva. I'm a country director of Oasis Kyrgyzstan, and today I'm very happy to be part of Oasis Global and share with our experience what we are doing here in Oasis Kyrgyzstan during this emergency situation. So we usually help the victims of human trafficking, violence, street children, and caregivers. We provide them food packages, we help them with housing issues. Almost every day we have 2 or 3 calls that young girls and young boys, they usually lost their housing. And plus young people, because of they are losing their job, they cannot able to pay for their renting costs. So we try to help them with finance. We try to communicate with donors and our partners so that we have capacity to help to more than hundreds of young people in crisis. In addition, we launched a very important project on human rights protection of children in contact with law and children in conflict with the law. So I hope that through this project we will be able to help to more than 11,000 vulnerable young people, orphans, in orphanages and boarding schools, to have access to guaranteed public services, medicine, education, proper housing, proper food. And thank you for listening, and good luck.
Thanks, Miriam. If you'd like to know more about the work of Oasis Kyrgyzstan, you can visit their page on our Oasis Global website, oasisglobal.org/oasis-Kyrgyzstan. We've put the link on the screen just in case you need some help spelling Kyrgyzstan. Let's move on to our Bible reading for this week, from the book of Matthew in the New Testament.
Our reading is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5. Introduction to the Sermon on the Mount. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them the Beatitudes. He said,
"Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled.
Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God.
Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven.
Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me.
When I was a kid, my mum and dad used to take me, along with my two sisters and my brother, to church every Sunday morning. There we'd sit each week on exactly the same long pew. My mum at one end, the four of us sandwiched in the middle, and my dad at the other. It was mind-numbingly dull. The service would drag on for what seemed like hour after hour after hour, and then came the sermon. It was sheer torture. I'd count the organ pipes again, try to model a paper aeroplane with the news sheet, then attempt to turn it into a giraffe or perhaps an elephant or a lion or some other animal, anything to relieve the boredom. But always knowing that even as we finally got out to head home, the countdown to next Sunday had already begun. So the big question this morning is why, in the story we just had read to us so imaginatively, did that crowd choose to follow Jesus up a Galilean hillside just to listen to what we call his Sermon on the Mount? Because unlike some members of modern day congregations, no one was forcing them to show up. They didn't have to be there. And it's not as though Galilee was short of a preacher or two. In fact, the historians tell us that this part of Israel was filled with preachers and sermonizers, with self-appointed rabbis and self-righteous Pharisees. They were to a penny on every other street corner. So, why were all these sermoned out ordinary people so keen to crowd around Jesus? What was it about his message that stood in such stark contrast to those of the countless other religious teachers of his day? What was so compelling about what Jesus had to say that they wanted to hear more and they followed him up that steep hillside? To answer these questions, we have to understand something about life in Jesus' Israel. As far as the religious leaders of Jesus' day were concerned, if you were a non-Jew, a Gentile, or a tax collector, or a shepherd, or involved in a dozen other dirty jobs, or if you were unfortunate enough to suffer from leprosy or blindness or some other incurable condition, or if you'd broken one of the hundreds of petty laws, the ones that they had established, you were classified as a sinner, an outsider. And more than that, sin was highly contagious, a contagious virus. And according to the religious elite, anyone who came into contact with it would also be contaminated by it. It was sticky. It clung to those who touched it or came too close to it. So, as a result of being labelled a sinner, there was a devastating effect on your life. You became a social as well as a religious outcast. So back to Jesus. Instead of avoiding the sinners, the disenfranchised, the oppressed, the excluded, the sick, the despised ordinary people, he seeks them out. God will bless you people who are spiritually poor, he says. God will bless you hungry people. God will bless you people who are crying. God will bless you people who are persecuted, he announces. All of which raises another question. Why were people in these categories blessed? Surely not because of their attainment or achievement, but simply because of God's all-encompassing and outrageous love for them. By the way, Jesus' original word, the one that the Gospels translate as blessed, perhaps even more accurately means blissfully or deliriously happy. That's why over the next few weeks, as part of our global gathering, the theme of these short talks, as we look at what have become known as the Beatitudes, is the great reversal. But even as we begin, it's essential to grasp that Jesus never suggests that his list of Beatitudes, is exhaustive. Instead, it's clear that it's nothing more than a series of examples of those who were oppressed and misunderstood in his day. What Jesus is saying is simply this: blessed are you, the spiritually, religiously and socially spat upon, the persona non grata. God's blessing belongs to you. These extraordinary statements of Jesus were designed to undermine the social, political and religious systems of his day. They focused the moral bankruptcy, not only of the Jewish hierarchy, but also that of their Roman overlords. Those who had formerly had the door of acceptance slammed firmly in their faces now found it flung wide open. A great reversal was taking place. But Jesus wasn't ordering people to somehow get poor or to start mourning or to get themselves persecuted if they wanted to know God's blessing. His list of Beatitudes weren't some kind of spiritual tick list for the extra zealous. To understand them this way is to misunderstand them. It reduces them to just one more set of soul-destroying religious conditions, yet more back-breaking bad news, rather than the grace-giving good news of God's liberation. So, if Jesus preached his Sermon on the Mount today, would he add to his list? Would he add these people? What about God bless you who are lonely, old, bullied, infertile, displaced, overworked, redundant, underpaid, unemployed, abused, divorced, single parents, excluded because of your race or sexuality or gender, anorexic, homeless, drug users, despised, exploited? God's blessing belongs to you. Well, we'll explore much more around all of this over the coming weeks, but for now, just one more thing. Before his audience could catch their breath, Jesus continued. He launches straight into another groundbreaking statement. You are the salt of the earth, he proclaims. I imagine he did it with a twinkle in his eye. And it's hard to overestimate how that would have made his hearers feel. Us? Salt? We've always been told we were scum. There must have been a large number of people sat on that hillside that day with giant smiles on their faces, chuckling to themselves or simply bursting into full-blown laughter as they listened to Jesus' words. And then came this profound point. If the salt no longer tastes like salt, how can it make food salty? Jesus never pushed or forced or bludgeoned or coerced or cajoled or bullied people. His was the carrot, not the stick. He wooed people, he won them. He believed in their inherent original goodness. He inspired them. He was on their side. Condemnation and judgment were not Jesus' tools. Jesus' audience on that day weren't depraved or evil, as their religious leaders had judged them to be. For the most part, they were only too well aware of their many failings and failures. Their big question had never been, do I believe in God? So much as, does God believe in me? And Jesus' answer was an affirming and reassuring yes. The great reversal had begun.
Hi. Sometimes the Beatitudes are referred to as the beautiful attitudes because they provide a blueprint on how to live a Christ-centered life. So let's pause together and take a moment to reflect on how we might exhibit Jesus' attitudes as we face this global pandemic together. For those of you familiar with the 9 Beats Collective, you might recognise some of their rewordings of these well-known sayings of Jesus. I'm going to read through each beatitude, and as I do, I want to encourage you to think of someone you know who is living counter-culturally and give thanks to God for them. You might also like to select one of the attitudes and challenge yourself this week to live it out in full. Blessed are those who trust, who choose to live with an open hand, giving of their money or themselves, even in uncertain times. Blessed are those who lament, who don't numb themselves to what is happening, but feel its enormity and grieve for the lives lost, standing alongside the families torn apart. Blessed are those who are humble, who recognise their strengths and their weaknesses and employ both in the service of others, both giving and receiving. Blessed are those who walk the way of justice, who dare to stand up and do something about the inequalities in our society which this virus is exposing. Blessed are those who show compassion, who are doing what they can, no matter how big or small, to care for the vulnerable, the elderly, and the sick. Blessed are those who act with the right motive, who serve simply to bless others and give without expecting anything in return. Blessed are the peacemakers, who are building bridges and connecting with family or friends they've grown distant from, or neighbours they never knew. Blessed are those who walk the path of radical love, making huge sacrifices for the sake of others by either staying at home or going to work. And blessed are those who surrender, who recognise what they can and can't control. They're all so important, but for me during this crisis, I found that last one to be particularly helpful. So I'd like to give you opportunity now, if you choose to join with me in saying the well-known words of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Thanks, Anna. That's nearly it for this week. We're going to end with a song, but before we do, I'm going to put some questions on the screen for us to think about. As we listen to the music, we could use this time to think about these questions and also to think about what Anna said about picking one of these 9 statements to focus on this week. Here are the questions. Are we guilty of making the story of Jesus sound boring, like a list of dull religious traditions and rules? What practical changes could we make so that instead people hear about the real Jesus, the radical, revolutionary, countercultural Jesus? And who are the people in our lives who, without thinking about it, we might look down on? How could we, like Jesus, be better at treating everyone equally, treating everyone as someone made in the image of God? And finally, here again are these 9 ideas. Which one are you going to focus on this week? As ever, thanks for being with us, and we'll see you again next week. Same time, same place. God bless you.
God and Father, great and holy, fearing not we come to Thee, fearing not though weak and lowly, for Your love
if you've enjoyed the songs we've used in our global gatherings, they're all available to watch again on the Oasis Waterloo YouTube channel. We're also uploading our global gatherings to YouTube, so they'll be available from midday every Sunday. Subscribe today at youtube.com/Oasis Waterloo.
And you give me joy.